After a brief hiatus, Wall Street Sports is back. I apologize. Had a bit of a scheduling issue on my end the last couple of weeks, but we fixed it. And we're here talking all things Championship Monday with my man Connor McGahan, Men's College World Series, Texas A&M Tennessee, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. But before we get started, as always, I've got a great introduction for my man here, on-air host at ESPN Syracuse Radio, associate producer at Citrus TV, and production intern at Fox Sports in Los Angeles. Connor, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
Carson, I appreciate it. I'm doing great. I got to give you the title of the king of introductions. Your last couple introductions on Wall Street Sports have been awesome. So, been loving the podcast, been listening to a lot, and now to come on as a guest, it's pretty cool. Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. Let's get right into this, dude. Let's talk College World Series first. I got a stat here from Front Office Sports. Through its first 6 games, the 2024 College World Series averaged 1.2 million viewers on ESPN. That was the largest television audience on record, up from record viewership last year. Now, I would assume ESPN is expecting some big TV numbers from Game 3 between A&M and Tennessee. I want to get some of your thoughts on what you saw from the World Series yesterday.
Yeah, obviously the numbers haven't came out yet, but I think if you look at the beginning of the Men's College World Series, the first 6 games averaged 1.2 million viewers, up 5% from last year, and the highest average at this point event on record. So you just look at the beginning of the World Series, and now you go all the way to the end. 2 high-storied programs. First time a #1 seed wins it. Tennessee has been in the news a bunch. They finally get over the hump and win it all. This was huge for ESPN, and I go back to the fact of if you're on a big platform, you're going to get more views. I think ESPN did a great job. They just tied in their rights with the College World Series through 2032. So the Men's College World Series isn't going anywhere, especially on ESPN. And I think the ability to have that on a major platform on cable television is not only huge for the sport of baseball, but huge for the viewership on the network side as well.
I love that you jumped right into the ESPN's contract with the College World Series going through 2032, because I like to believe that ESPN is doing everything in their power to hold on to college baseball's postseason simply because of NIL, right? More guys are staying in college and making money instead of going to single A and double A. And personally, I think the game is better for it, and the numbers there show for it.
I think it's better for it. I also think for the viewership, it just makes sense, right? Let's turn to last year. The 2023 College World Series drew its highest ever total attendance. Nearly 400,000 people were in Omaha watching these games in person. And I think a big reason for that is the next generation of these Major League All-Stars are battling it out in Omaha. Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens, Wyatt Langford, they all were in the World Series last year. Skeens went 1, Dylan Crew went 2, and Langford went 4. So these are high-profile athletes, guys who are next up in the MLB. Being able to watch them in Omaha, I think it's unique, and I think it just goes to show if these guys stay in college, they decide not to go straight to the league. Not only are they going to make money through NIL, but I also think their fan base is going to grow. Why? Because you get to see them in person and on TV.
And I think because more guys are just not making that professional jump so early on, and it's making the games way more competitive and way more entertaining, right?
100%.
100%.
And I
Now,
think you turn to, Paul Skeens now, I think, is one of the biggest names in baseball. He's only
I think
been
he's
in the
the
league
betting favorite to win NL
Rookie
Rookie
of
of
the
the Year.
Year.
Yeah, and he's
And
only
he's
played
only
a
been
couple
in this league
games.
for what, 4 months?
Right.
Why? Because he got that popularity at LSU, because he was a big name. He went #1 overall in the draft. And I think that just goes to show you if you want to make it in Major League Baseball, if you want to have a name for yourself, doing well in college and growing a brand isn't going to hurt at all.
I think it doesn't hurt that he's dating Livy Dunn either.
I knew you were going to mention that guy.
Now, okay, as a former high school athlete, I know you played golf, and you're working at Fox Sports. You're working on a bunch of different productions there. What do you believe makes a production like the College World Series so entertaining for so many people to watch when before I think college baseball's postseason probably really wasn't on many people's minds?
100%. And I think it's a lot of things and learning more. I think one's the venue is very important. You turn to anything. Look at the Super Bowl. Not only the venue's huge, well, you have a major artist with the halftime show. So not even if the game's great, you're going to have a huge number. The viewership's going to be great because of how much that venue brings. You go to Omaha. Now, not much is going on in Omaha besides the College Baseball World Series, and that's what makes it unique. I
The
think
two
that's a
are almost simultaneous. The city of
I
Omaha
mean,
and the Men's
literally,
College
you
World
have to put them
Series.
together. I think that's a huge reason. And I think also just the money going into it. I think ESPN has done a great job with the finances of the College Baseball World Series. I think the play by play has been great. The production side has been perfect. And just the storylines that come with it. I'm going to get to that when we turn to the NHL. But on the topic right now, when you have two major programs going back to back, neither team has won a title yet, and a coach on Tennessee who is not afraid of the critics, who loves to go after the media, that's going to make primetime television no matter where you are.
Now, I love that you brought up the venue because I think that is really important. So, I read an article earlier this week about the Omaha Sports Commission basically getting it set in stone. They're going to have that there for through 2035, but at this point, it'll likely be indefinitely.
Mhm.
There's a lot of economic implications with this event nowadays. It's almost on par with hosting a March Madness regional. The stadium holds over 30,000 fans, which is ridiculous for a college baseball stadium. They had 25,000 fans per game and a new attendance record. I mean, this event is pretty serious for
And
what is well into the summer months and not typically the prime sports season.
And Carson, let's look at what they're competing with in the major sports leagues, right? You have the NBA Finals going on, you have the NHL playoffs going on, you have all these things. Golf's in a big run right now. It's the summer of soccer, not only just for Fox, but the whole world with the Copa America and
And
the
the
Euro
Euros, yep.
Championship. So everything going on, and you still can drive not only the viewership, but people there in person. I think that says a lot to the product you're putting out and how your fan base is taking it, going to Omaha and being able to support your team.
I totally agree. I'm honestly so interested to see what these numbers look like television wise for game three because of how strong the output was in game one and game two. Um, and I think this event is going to continue to do really well. Uh,
Chair
for
problems.
that's fair. Chair problems, right? I mean, so I've got it. I got a little stat here. So this year, the College World Series made over $500,000 in net profit, but its overall economic impact for the city of Omaha was $6.5 million.
How crazy is that?
And like, listen, this is no Eras tour. There's no Taylor Swift generating, hundreds of millions. But for
For
uh
Omaha, that's good, Carson.
right, for a collegiate sports postseason to be doing that well in such a short period of time, when it is really outside of the two biggest revenue sports in college, which is football and basketball, I think that's pretty solid. And I think it's going to be there for a long time.
100%. And why move it, right? If you
Right.
move something from such an iconic place, not only will there be backlash, but there's a chance it's not the same. Now, I get it. If you're smart, if you look at the numbers, if you want to break it down, moving to a major city with more hospitality, with a bigger city vibe, I do think will help the College Baseball World Series. Now, if you move this to New York City, if you could play it at one of the major venues, of course, you have to do that. But I think something so simple with what college baseball does, especially with the World Series, is you go to Omaha, you play in an iconic venue, but it's also all baseball around there. And I think that's what makes it special, having its own taste instead of just joining a major city and just being a part of there for a year.
I totally agree. Well, let's kind of get to the next part. I know you with the NHL and the Stanley Cup Final, the best two words in sports: game seven. I got this quote here really quick that I wanted to share. I read this in an athletic article. This is from Daniel Cohen. He's the executive vice president of global media rights at Octagon, it's a sports agency. He said, "A game seven, regardless of sport, is like hitting the Powerball number." Because it's so true. Like
Nothing better.
this series looked like it was going to be the probably the worst thing the NHL and the ESPN had seen in a long time. Because let's be real, none of these organizations want to sweep. They want to go all seven games and generate as much revenue as possible, get as much eyeballs on this product. And really, the way that you can sum up the Stanley Cup, it was the perfect intersection between a programming nightmare and a dream financially for ESPN, right? Like,
I also think before puck drop on game one, ESPN and NHL were a little upset because they got their Connor McDavid fan base, they got their Canadian team, but we all know in the back of their minds they wanted the Rangers in the Stanley Cup for the
without a
viewership
doubt.
and the ability to have games in New York City. Now, as a diehard Ranger fan, this was tough to watch this game seven. I'm happy that 4-1, but 100%. If this was a sweep, Florida has been here before. They're the more experienced team. Now, you take McDavid and Draisaitl off of Edmonton. Are they the same team? Absolutely not. This game goes seven in one of the most iconic series ever. I saw yesterday from a couple media heads saying that this is the biggest game in hockey ever, not only because of the sweep, but because McDavid's ability to cement his legacy if he comes back. Obviously, that doesn't happen, but the fact that this went seven is great for ESPN and even better for the fan bases.
I loved how many stories came out of this game seven. Obviously, the Oilers started the series down 3-0. Then they become the 12th team to force a game seven, which I was surprised it was even that many. But then you realize the last team to actually win that game seven was a Canadian team in the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it
Open up the
really
history
just seemed
book
like it
back
was
to
like
1942.
right. Like it just seemed like everything was pushing in the way that the Edmonton Oilers were just going to come back in a dramatic fashion and take it, but just not enough for Edmonton over Florida.
And for ESPN, the fact that this went game seven, and for me,
Oh,
the easiest comparison for a network like ESPN being able to broadcast a game seven is headlines and drama drive viewership. A couple
totally.
examples: the US Open a couple of weeks ago at Pinehurst, an iconic venue again. Rory McIlroy and Bryson DeChambeau going back and forth in the final holes. That was the most watched US Open in 10 years, and it was the most watched East Coast US Open for quite some time. You turn to the NBA a month ago. The Timberwolves and Nuggets in the second round NBA playoff game seven, 8.41 million viewers across TNT. That's the largest early round NBA playoff audience ever. So again, headlines and drama. This was exactly what the NHL needed. They saw what happened in the NBA when you have a boring finals, really. Now, I know the Boston fans aren't going to be happy I said that, and congratulations on the championship, but it's a 4-1 game. The biggest headlines is Kyrie coming back, and that really didn't prove anything. So you turn to the NHL, you fight with the NBA, and you get what you wanted, a game seven in Florida. Unbelievable atmosphere.
It's so funny you bring that up because I fully was in belief because of how well Luka Doncic played in that finals. I thought that he was going to get the Finals MVP.
100%.
I was so glad that Connor McDavid ended up taking the award this year because he was the best player on the ice, no doubt about it.
Yes, 100%. And he's the best player in hockey. He's the best player in the planet. No question about it. Now, in terms of winning the Conn Smythe, as a biased Ranger fan, I mentioned before, the Florida Panthers don't win this if Sergei Bobrovsky wasn't in net and wasn't unbelievable in the playoffs. He had a 906 save percentage. He had two shutouts, only let one goal in game seven. So I know the argument between Bobrovsky and Alexander Barkov winning it, it's there. But yes, 100%, McDavid deserved it. His run in the playoff was historic. He led the playoffs in goals. He broke Wayne Gretzky's assist record in the playoffs, and he had 42 points, which is the fourth most in a single postseason history. And the three guys ahead of him are Wayne Gretzky twice, and Mario Lemieux. So it's pretty good company. Gretzky deserved it. Now, being on the losing team, he'll trade that all just for a chance to hoist the cup.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I want to ask you this question because obviously you hail from Jersey. You are a big time Rangers fan and a hockey fan. I come from Cleveland. We do not have an NHL franchise. My consensus among sports fans, and I could be totally wrong, and I want to get your input on this, is it goes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. How do you feel about that?
I completely see your point, and I think for 95% of the Americans, that's right. And for me, yes, I would trade anything for a Giants Super Bowl. So yes, NFL is obviously one, and I think the bottom three are I think they're interchangeable of how you grew up. So for me, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm not going to call myself a diehard, so I'll never put them at two. But for the Rangers and Yankees, growing up with their success, growing up watching them, of course, they're going to be 2, 3. Now, the NFL leads sports.
Right.
Football drives viewership. It drives the financial background of all of these major networks. Of course, that's going to be one. But I do think when you turn to Canada, when you turn to these different organizations outside of the US, it's do or die with hockey. And I think that's why Edmonton's fan base was so critical in this Stanley Cup final.
So I love that you bring that up because I think that is so important to think about when you think about the contracts between the NHL and ESPN and actually keeping hockey is they do have not just the American fan base but also the Canadian fan base to think about, which is a huge part of
Even bigger than the
hockey,
American, I want to
100%.
argue.
Oh, and I mean, I got this right here. So Friday's broadcast of Game Six averaged like 4.2 million viewers, but Game One had like over 7 million because they
Mhm.
incorporated both Canadian viewership and American. So I'd like to believe that ESPN, like it did when they re-signed the rights to the NBA, they're going to do everything in their power to keep hockey as long as it keeps generating a really powerful product.
100%. And I remember a couple years ago when NBC sold hockey, there was a big debate in the league if this was smart for ESPN, if the NBC should have gave this up and should have had a bidding war. And now you turn to it. Now let's be honest, is hockey the most viewed sport in the world? No. But when it comes to terms of Stanley Cup, when it comes to guys like Connor McDavid, people are going to watch, ratings are going to go up. Now, if this was a Dallas versus Florida series of two fan bases that are big but are nowhere near the top 10,
Totally.
100%. We're having a different conversation. But that's not how it went. And I think with the Canadian viewership and the ability to incorporate that into your ratings, that will help ESPN. And that will be the reason why ESPN holds on to hockey if they do.
Totally agree. Connor, love chatting baseball, College World Series, the NHL, Stanley Cup. I appreciate you coming on. For everyone listening, I apologize for the 2 week hiatus. Glad to get an episode out this week. Glad to have Connor on. You can follow us on Twitter at WSS Sports _ and on YouTube as well. Check in anytime. Thanks, guys.
You got it.